sovereignty. Our argument is not that the form of the state is bad, but that you inundate it with liberal forms of governments, which is Man 16. But before colonialism, indigenous nations were diverse, sovereign, and self-governing, critically self-affirmative and self-transformative. Ethics of desubjectification are closer to sovereignty. It is my right to be responsible. Indian sovereignty is real. It is not a moral language game or a matter to be debated in historical terms. It is what they have Cold Hard's argument about against recognition for the place of land that forcefully challenges all conception of sovereignty. Form and content of his approach is the barrage of indigenous practice of disruptive counter-sovereignty. It is not sovereignty, but counter-sovereignty that is essential to the research and indigenous struggle for things that a colonial frame tends to associate with the common sense of liberal sovereignty. Rounding normativity still understands the importance of self-determination and sovereignty. It adopts an approach of counter-sovereignty. This notion cannot capture a place-based ethic. Natives don't understand it as a contract, but as a promised man. And 16, sovereignty is absolutely incapable of capturing that relation. Indigenous struggles are struggles oriented around the question of the land. The ethical framework provided by these place-based practices is grounded normativity. Main obstacles to achieving peaceful coexistence is acceptance of classical notion of sovereignty. Framework for discussions. Traditional indigenous nation is commonly defined relationally, marked it relationally. The argument that the state is inevitable is not offense for them, because yes, we can still work outside those sort of institutions. Your heuristic doesn't engage the state anyway. We'll take correct.
You got 5 seconds. I don't know what you had.
We're at 5.
You good?
Alright.
One of your link arguments is that we over to determine what natives want, and then you read a bunch of cards about native conceptualizations of sovereignty in totality. How do you reconcile this?
How, in totality, so our criticism of the homogeneous frame of native
and then you
sovereignty.
read a bunch of cards that homogenize native interpretations.
No, we really don't. We discuss indigenous struggles for sovereignty is something that exists universally.
This is what natives think sovereignty is, and this is what natives think their relationship to.
That is absolutely incorrect. Argument is that indigenous struggles for sovereignty do exist.
Then that's no different than the evidence we have read for why the permutation is solved.
Yes, you've made your argument. Let me make the distinction. We do think that indigenous struggles for sovereignty do exist. So say that those exist collectively is not bad. However, your plan text is like, we will take some indigenous laws, apply it.
This is actually important.
Yeah.
The Indian canons.
Yeah.
You think those are indigenous laws?
Indian canons? You put one
Just answer my question first. Do you think that these are Indian laws, like made by Indian?
Indian canon is a thing that says that the federal government should look towards native rights.
Right. Yes, it is a judicial doctrine developed by the Supreme Court. It's not us copying and pasting a bunch of indigenous laws.
Yeah, but the enforcement mechanism from the plan text is still based on one court understanding of what those laws are, obviously.
By deferring to native interpretations of those laws. That is the mandate of that.
If that argument is true, then AF can't solve anything, because if you're like, we need one top-down solution, and there's contradictory laws, then you obviously can't solve, because how would the court
What contradictory laws? It's about agency interpretation.
So if there's no contradiction, then that means your argument is that they all agree with each other, which is our whole
That is not our argument. It's about whether or not the agency interpretation impedes on the natives' ability to rule their land.
Yeah,
or
we have made the argument that the understanding of indigenous sovereignty is something that universally needs the state to be recognized as problematic.
Actually, that's actually a good second argument. The next question I have is, you make this argument at the top about Western sovereignty.
Western sovereignty?
Yeah, about the affirmative imposes Western sovereignty.
Yeah, that's the argument I was just making.
The entire Bernil, Hickson, and other pieces of evidence we've read that indicate that reconciling the existence of Western sovereignty is key to opening up indigenous interpretations of native sovereignty. How do you reconcile it?
So you're saying we've made a descriptive claim that Western sovereignty exists, which means that we're immune from criticisms of Western sovereignty? Our argument is that you have engaged in the same practice.
The question is, how does the alternative resolve the fact that the state imposes its will on natives?
The act doesn't resolve that either. You keep trying to do this ethical blackmail, which is like, the state is doing bad things now. We're like, obviously that's true, but debate is a research space.
What forms of contingent engagement are good?
What forms of contingent engagement are good?
You say that engagement with the state is good, which I think is probably a double diamond turn.
I don't think it's a double turn. We think that your heuristic is not a productive instance of that. I don't need to tell you how to go do your politics. I just need to indict what you've done in the 1E seat, because I'm mad.
Assuming
Go for that in the 2AR.
so it's gonna be framework and then bottom of the 2 and Z.
Hold on, let me get this up.
Just the top paragraph.
Actually, you can take second paragraph. You want me to do this before or after framework?
After.
Separate. That was another 5 seconds.
I'm sorry, what was the order, framework, and then what?
Framework, bottom of the 2 and Z. So we took 5 more, so we're at 550. All right. Is anybody now ready? 2 framing issues. 1, winning framework is sufficient reason to vote negative. The ballot is a referendum on whether the act it culminates a valuable approach to academia. Their model of debate produces bad forms of scholarship. 2nd, education outweighs fairness. Equality is an appeal to the fantasy of wholeness within debate, which is impossible due to the technical and resource disparities. The only remaining value of the debate is maximizing the value of our speech. Now, the role of the ballot is to analyze the rhetorical investments of the one who sees politics and representation before considering whether the implementation is a good idea. The symbolic precedes policy. The role of judges is to be a rhetorical critic. That's Futaki. 10 policies fail because they've fantastical foundations of policymaking are not acknowledged. Fantasy becomes the supplement. The cunning perception is the inevitability of failure. Unveiling the nature of striving the idealistic policies and liberty in particular, accepting the loss of the fantasy that drives the policies control over the uncontrollable. The state objectives of the policies created the achieve may used to deflect the attention away from the policymakers who identify the ideas to justify them. Can this be generalized across all policymaking? The answer is unequivocally yes. Preoccupied with the survival of future generation economic development, symbolic order cannot be translated into workable policy objectives. The demands for particularly psychoanalysis lies in the power to highlight the humanitarian nature of uncertainty, but in psychoanalysis, not with the productive role of the failure, the rethinking of the calculated rationality policymakers rely on well-made decisions as a starting point in policymaking. We need to accept the imaginary structural desire. This will overcome the split between policy design and implementation, engage in decision making. The might break the cycle of policy repetition and blame accountability by reconsidering the very idea of the policy as a matter of projection. A perfect world would challenge the unconscious motivations and under policies. And we have several net benefits. 1, the plan focus is bad. It creates a bad decision making model by which students can defend their assumptions and the process by which there are formulation conclusions. If they win policy making good, it's a reason why we cannot endorse the AF without the justification we're criticizing. It's a reciprocal and fair for all the reasons above, and also a reason we saw their predictability argument because we are more reward. 2nd, objectivity. To say their claims for an objective framework of debate ignores the antagonism inherent in the real, which prevents any political mobilization from being effective for presupposing that there's a right and wrong way to engage in policies. And 3rd is the injection of fantasy. To said this was particularly conceded from the Lumberg criticism. Lumberg is a criticism of the rhetorical investment they want to see, which predetermines their content, means they don't get to weigh the affirmative. Now, extending here, subpoint A, there's a failed unity of the social relation because of what you say you want will never adequate to what you actually want. This is what subjects give up when they are inaugurated. The symbolic, the one he sees an attempt to feign unity or to pretend that unity is when they read the app and simulated simulation. The rule is produces bad political subjectivity because there will always be a disconnect between their policy and their attempt to paper over the antagonism of the subject in the reading of the 1AC. Subpoint B, the 1AC's commitment to concrete proposals of pragmatism is a fantasy that hides our individual incapacity, hides the soft passivity of the status quo where the gas impacts our dissent to the ballot because they want to maintain the ability to read their affirmative. They get stuck in the process of learning more and more only to never materialize change and their interpretation. We meet the alternative is competitive because it says no to the affirmative and we have links to it. Now, they say they can weigh the plan, but sure, you can weigh the plan, but there's a sequencing dissent to what that weighing is. You should think of this as an impact framing question. The question of desire and rhetorical justification is a prior question than the plan, else people can say the N-word and get away with it, and it doesn't meet the 1AC. They can leverage all their demand good offense, and they should be prepared to defend what they see. Now, they say advocacy skills, but our framework controls the internal link. If the rhetorical justifications are bad, then the exportation of those skills will be rooted in the bad rhetorical, the bad rhetoric of the 1AC. Now, the bottom of the 2NC. The alternative. To answer their vague alts, we're not vague alts. It's just to vote negative when we're defending it all the time. Any vague arguments or justifications, not mandates, which doesn't like say it's vague alts, but good force engagement with the other side of liberty. And the alternative is to say no to the Afro Lumberg reference says that this creates a blockage between them and the object of desire. This strategy and digital fantasy and forces them to reorientate their investments into contingent politics outside of debate. The internal link turns their advocacy skills arguments because of the care more about their status as an advocate of the plan than the plan itself. when this argument, it means that all their impacts are reasons to vote negative, which is the justifications for the pick. The next argument we're going for is the blatantly conceded academy link. They have absolutely no answer to the explicit university critiquing the POOC evidence, which is an independent reason to vote negative. Their productive knowledge of the AF creates is recirculated and commodified in the neoliberal networks, which allows the state to adjust and reconstruct and re-articulate itself. This turns case because the state will adapt and circumvent the plan with new laws. Additionally, this is the reason their reading of the 1AC debate is explicitly bad, which should come first because the plan doesn't actually get passed, aka fiat is illusory and doesn't happen, but this round is being recorded and surveilled by the state, namely see the camera to my left, which proves that the neoliberal state is able to modify and critique it. They have absolutely no answer, and it is an independent reason to vote negative. Now, the next argument we're going for is that Sharma link the AF is a form of differential racism, a new form of neoliberal racism that attempts to say that cultural differences are a reason to send natives away into land that is native to that place. That is explicitly as bad and exclude resistance strategies like the Lakota tribe, who took land that had no ancestral attachment to, but they still did it as a broader resistance neoliberal strategies. They have the singularity of how the natives should gain access to self-determination, namely via their access to the change of the Chevron difference, but it doesn't allow for multiple different forms of resistance, which is what their evidence is explicitly calling for via the permutation. Now, any other arguments you want me to go for?
How much time?
30.
3?
30.
Oh, sure. You can read the card.
Doesn't have time for the card now.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, read.
Indecisiveness strike that.
How much, Joe, haven't you written down how much we had left?
Where's my case?
This is,
That's not the case.
I'm pretty sure it was like 7 something that we were on.
closer.
Where?
It was 6:55, right?
Sure.
Okay.
60.
Okay, 6:50.
Did you write it? Can you teach that?
No, it's just.
Okay.
Maybe elsewhere. And the whole stuff should be.
What was the name of the first DA on framework?
On framework, I think fantasy of wellness DA.
Okay. 2:45. I'm gonna go use the bathroom real quick. There is one card. Do you want it in?
Yeah. Or an interactive.
Yeah, okay.
Seems reciprocal.
Figured as much. Some people don't care, some people do. So I figured I'll ask. I'll put it in the doc and send it out. Were there cards? There's one. I'm sending it out right now. Okay, the order will be the advantage, the K will, I'll answer the overview and then do the framework stuff, and then I'll just signpost the rest of the stuff. Let me make sure my stuff's in order here. Anyone not ready? Block concedes after two conceding internal like subpoint one is measured only every time the cards defer to agency interpretation to overtry they impedes their ability to self-determine. That's all causes native genocide. Subpoint two is water. The difference results in an active force of native water control. The loans of the EPA the treatment of the state provisions which grant control over water when allowed and native the self-determinations that they implement incorrectly. The plan reverses that. There are two impacts. One is value to life self-determination. It eviscerates a cultural and political agency causing the second trauma that's roots in Murphy. Second is native genocide. Lack of self-determination results in racist the decisions being enacted with enable accumulation of poisoning of tribes water. Don't make me reinvent the wheel when they consider the apps. Okay. Or answer the arguments on the overview at the top. Their first fantasy and desire arguments will be answered down below, which down below, which will apply later. The next argument is the state is bad arguments. We only, as long as we win the framework debate, we only have to win that the state is good. The instance of the affirmative, the water stuff. Yes, we saw, but they conceded the diver evidence indicate that working within the state is uniquely key for things such as funding. The plan resolves independently. The plan resolves upstream implications. One that is cross-executed. That's the warrants of the card that they conceded in both speeches. Don't make me reinvent the wheel. The framework debate. You should weigh the versus the competitive alternative. subpoint 1 is grounded competitive equity. We should have to be able to be the critique predicated off of the 1A, predicated off of the 1AC. Their model meets 9 minutes of a 1AC speech, and we should only have to win that the courts are good in the instance of the affirmative. Literally, the 9 minutes of the 1AC is an indication of why the courts are good. Yes, rhetorically, etc. The courts have been bad for natives, but the argument is that in the world of the affirmative, those predictions are uniquely good. The education arcs were linked to them. Education, fairness controls education and limits, which means that we gain in-ground education such as advocacy skills, which I don't think the block has an explicit answer to. We all leave debate to go into grassroots movements, etc., or to become lawyers. The key thing with any of those things is that we have to understand how to operate within those states or challenge it, which is why that is good. The goal of the ballot argument is self-serving and arbitrary. You should reject and group the DAs. They're a question of how our epistemology is articulated. If we win that our epistemology is good writ large and it's contingent on winning that, the F method is good. The sequencing stuff, it's not a sequencing question. The arguments on the perm will disprove it. Fiat is fake, no shit. But the discussions we have in ground, drop through clash, fairness, etc., all matter. Which was explained above. Gut check. Spaghettios. You drop theory. That's subpoint 1 is that vague alts are a voter for vague alts are a voter. It kills Afghans. Zero chance that they compete versus infinite number of theoretical positions. We lose all the benefits of the F without being able to test whether or not the F is better than the set quote. Subpoint B is that it justifies vague alts because they're not explicitly tied to this specific action. Vague alts are a voter for fairness and deterrent, which is a conceded impact to it, which is your easy F out. At worst, it takes out the alternative because they can't go for it. The psychoanalysis stuff makes in the career evidence. Western psychoanalysis is a trial therapy and epistemology, but it's violent when it's applied in the context of indigenous people writ large. The way that they've critiqued the method of the F psychoanalysis is not justifiable. Hindsight, I think it's Samuel's 93. There is something offensive about the reduction of the interpretation of the complex of the clumsy and sensitivity, the psychological, the terms of the tendency, the man implies something that led to wonder if the method existed and the engagement of the psychology in the public and the possible with politics, I mean the distribution of the power of the complex of the political phenomena that do not conform to the individualistic of the firm to these and the representative from the United States, treating the culture as if I were a baby, if we will look at the pathology of the culture, we shall be afraid of this as retrospective of prophecy, the permutation debate, the F solves the K, the Brian evidence is the gold standard for evidence. It engages with a fundamental question. The F solves the K. We have a theory of power of politics that is outlined that they win. That you could keep the permutation. That should be weighed against the solvency claims. Permutation to both the theory goes largely uncontested. The perma inverts the space of ambiguity that all their ontology claims are realized on realized into this space of resistance that allows natives to redefine the creative sovereignty according to their interpretations and creates a cross-cutting the sovereignty implicates the legitimacy by using their tools. The F is a specific example of this by using legal frameworks and funds of the state of the US of the federal government that can regulate off a reservation, even courts of the federal government, so they create a complex of the government to a government relationship. We're linked to their all or nothing claims. This is false. This places the native either with a total colonial of domination or eversion with the state of entering this framing of the state makes it sure that the native never invest their energy into political strategies. The alternative it doesn't solve one is it doesn't solve tribal management over native lands with the capacity to resolve that. Second is that keeping natives out of the government is a condition for exactly what the colonizers want, which is a conceded impact term. Because it just means that they justify paternal doctrine saying that natives are capable within the government. The Watershed Convention, it's false. The diver card indicates native controls up and downstream. That was in the overview. The state inevitable stuff. There's I'll do it here. There's more or less having a conceded state inevitable, saying that the state exists as long as that we do. That's a Holcomb evidence. It doesn't change different powers. Yes, would a char die for engagement, even if we get rid of people. We still have capital privilege, etc., which we use things like military and implement justice reforms for the state, which is worse. The Lakota claims of the F1 is offense for us. So they've Lakota has empirically engaged with the state and the legal system about making claims for treaties. Second is that this proves the permutation isn't severance, but largely arguments about Lakota challenge Black Hill movements as an example of the permutation, because yes, they have the land back now, but the government has stolen $900 million in trust from them. The claim would solve that because it resolves ambiguity between the natives and in the context of Indian law canons. That's a whole evidence. It's an example of the Nixon evidence indicates that working outside of the state is violent, but there's more than radical alternatives to that, i.e. the Black Hill argument I've explained above proves this. The links properly. One is that the neg links to them cross-sex is rather damning on this question indicates there's no link differential or distinction. If there is a small one, it proves there's little impact. The same some stuff we've impacted on it. They've said that sometimes we have to make contingent forms of action in the context of the after the settlers to receive from the political environment, which means that settler determination is never considered or achieved. But a lot of stuff is not about the act. Argument about using and placing demands on the state, which was above.
Okay,
Yeah, we have somewhere. The 550.
same thing. You went to subtowards like what answer?
I remember.
Sure, just. Okay. you done with your?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to.
Yeah, I just want to change one word.
Okay, it's all good. So the critique, there will be an overview, then the framework debate, then kind of straight down.
Sorry, it was totally zoned out. Can you say that again?
Yeah, so critique, there's an overview at the top, then the framework, then straight down.
Hold on, where's my pen? There, I'm good.
Good. This debate is simple. They have not one that their heuristic is the good form of politics that their evidence prescribes. And when I see cross-sects, I ask them why it was good, and they have said, I don't know, we're not going to defend that. And then they have not been able to articulate a good reason why it's good to articulate or to externalize our agency onto institutions other than a vacuous fairness impact, which our offense will massively outweigh. We are making one argument. Your heuristic sucks. You have not inaugurated the good form of institutional engagement. Your evidence prescribes your only justification for getting the plan is fairness with no connection to the rest of the F. If we want that you make your reforms or movements worse or less likely to happen, obviously that matters more. You're the one who chose to shotgun indigenous people suffering, so if we win that that's sort of a tokenization that is violent to those indigenous people, then it obviously matters more. You may be frustrated about two Texas kids that are like trying to be knockoffs of Harvard BS, but they have just not made responsive arguments in this debate, so you shouldn't let yourself be persuaded by new TR claims. The Pook evidence is an easy way out of this debate. There is absolutely no defense of the university or education. The choice here, 1A or the 1 in our flag to the Academy K is an independent reason to vote negative, which means that there's no two-way arguments. The 1EC operates within the Academy and University. That's bad. The new knowledge production of the 1EC gets commodified and re-articulated in the lens of neoliberalism in order to stabilize the neoliberal horizon. That's 1EC Pook 18, which A turns the case because it proves the state will be able to predict the F and find new legal barriers and loopholes to exploit to continue native genocide, and B is a reason that the affirmative can't stop. So with the very worst, you can vote negative on presumption. They have conceded the thesis of our Lundberg evidence. Our alternative is to say no to the affirmative, which is not vague at all, which I'll explain later, but this creates a blockage between them and their object of desire, which is good insofar as we win arguments about externalizing ethics onto institutions. They have conceded our intentional fantasy evidence in our thesis. The Lundberg evidence says that externalizing agency is bad for two reasons. First, it necessitates investment in the status quo, because think about it, if the plan happens, then if we win that they are committed to their status as ethical advocates for indigenous people, then when things get better for indigenous people, they have less to advocate for. If we win our arguments that they are invested in the subject position of savior, then that necessitates violence to continue to exist, which is something that they have not answered. The second argument is that they need the institutions themselves to exist, because making a demand requires an institution to fulfill that demand, which results in repetition compulsion, where we continually propagate the existence of institutions because we're invested in those things. Argument is that voting out makes the plan less likely to happen, which means it's game over on these things. The day impact system says the alternative solves by breaking the cycle of repetition convulsion. The last thing I'll extend before I get to the framework arguments is that the Rozo argument from the 2NC that there's a huge passivity to you, which is when we wait on the state to make things better, we don't engage in sort of continued forms of politics ourselves, like the grassroots activism that they have advocated for. The framework arguments, you get to weigh the rhetorical consequences of the affirmative, but not the plain text, because externalizing agency is bad. Our only real impact to this is competitive equity. One, you can still weigh the rhetorical consequences of the plan. We are limited by your choices, and you should be able to defend your rhetoric and things like demands good, which you just didn't do in this debate. There's no terminal impact to this. Kissinger and the pacifists both want us out of Afghanistan. The entire debate is about why your assumptions for the plan are a good reason to vote for the affirmative. So the only debate about justifications is educational, which is the only education impact in the debate. Their only impact is vacuous education. We have impact toward the education you produce, because it makes us invested in institutions, which creates a distinction between will and capacity. The best version of any framework arguments they might make is basically learning things good, because it makes us able to challenge institutions. Even if they win those arguments, they are not winning that they will make those institutions better. So there's no terminal impact to voting affirmative. They say that their epistemology is good. There's no warrant for this argument. You should think of our argument as a pick out of the mandate for institutional engagement via Western governance on indigenous people. Yes, you are correct that the state is inevitable and may even be good in some instances, but we shouldn't tell ourselves that we are doing productive engagement when really we're just in a debate space trying to beat each other. They say that vague alternatives are bad. The alternative isn't vague. You can see the one argument that we are mandating, the only mandate of the alternative is to vote negative. Everything else is just impact framing, and the fact that psychoanalysis is complicated is kind of a you problem insofar as it's not a mandate of the alternative. There's no shiftiness in cross-sex check, which solves the terminal impact to all of your arguments. Critique, the first argument they make is that psychoanalysis is bad for indigenous people. This is not, there's not a coherent impact explained. You are, to this argument or reason why it's bad, you're not indigenous, which means this isn't offense against you, and we're not psychoanalyzing all indigenous people, but rather we're questioning your investments, which are problematic. This is also, they've conceded that this is not about Lacan, it's an insight to Fanon, some book that was written about psychoanalysis, but it's a huge field, and we don't have to defend all of it, just our application of it. The falsifiability DA, come on, this is a very clear argument in the 1 and C, and it should have been, this falsifiability argument is like the one thing that could be responsive, so it should have been in the 2AC. They have no justification for the new 1A argument. Our evidence indicates that we are falsifiable because even if traditional psychoanalysis is falsifiable, we can apply psychoanalysis to language and look at repeatable forms, and the way people systematically engage with institutions is sort of clear evidence of falsifiability. There's no impact to the falsifiability or reason. It's a good standard to explain. The permutation is a neg argument because it demonstrates that they have investments in the fantasy. It's a question of the framework because our argument is that we should vote negative to interrupt the cycle of their repetition convulsion where they are invested in their impacts. There's no net benefit to the permutation because the alternative is preferable, and we should say no to the affirmative. If the permutation involves voting F, it doesn't solve our impacts. They say colonizers want indigenous people to ignore state. Calling indigenous people savages is a status quo of the state. Yes, it's inevitable, but you're not the sort of contingent action your evidence prescribes. We agree institutions exist. It's not offense because you can still work outside them, but we haven't said the state is bad. We've said we shouldn't think that we're engaging with the state productively because that makes the plan less likely to happen. You voting affirmative makes things like the F less likely to happen, which is bad for indigenous people and outweighs their offense.
Okay. We have 2:45. Say this way. to shut the door.
Yeah. Someone walk away.
It's gonna be the case, then, okay, do you want the order of the case?
What do you think?
It's hard to go for our Federal Center bad when you not even contested the thesis of the claim of the affirmative. You conceded the entirety of the affirmative that says the application of the specific fantasy the affirmative calls for vis-a-vis the application of the Indian law candidates to the Supreme Court doctrine. Chevron is good because it resolves the ways in which the court resolves ambiguities, always in the favor of agencies recreating the same lack of self-determination and ability to determine one's own indigenous sovereignty, which culminates in a native genocide and an active poisoning of water vis-a-vis the specific treatments the provisions the affirmative say are good but implemented incorrectly vis-a-vis ruling on Chevron that the plan reverses the lack of any engagement with this on this means that there's a direct impact to the entire thesis of the tunar coming out of the tunar, because we have explicit, clearly defined reasons why the form of engagement within the institutions we've outlined, as well as the fantasies we call on, are good for the populations we have identified, which also answers a sort of education claims on framework to critique. There are two framing issues for how you evaluate the criticism. First, there's offense, defense. There's no clear point of offense coming out the tuner. There's just a bunch of defensive claims. Even the impacts. What are the impacts to circumvention or institutional engagement? What are the impacts? What are the impacts to Western forms of sovereignty or desire? You don't know that. I don't know that either. But there's a clear ongoing native genocide occurring now that the affirmative has outlined clear and verifiable steps based on a clear, consistent theoretical framework, as well as pure empirical evidence that you can at least resolve a large majority of if you vote affirmative, or at least on the permutation. The critique is mired with a series of double terms that should frame the links. In one place I see institutional is good, the other it's bad. The desire is bad, and they call for the same ballot. We desire as seen by the most simplistic alternative, circulate information evidence with the same university system and model we're in frames links because even if the alternative can overcome that, then so can the permutation. It also means that even if you think these claims are new, should artificially inflate the affirmative claims, because we've developed a clear, consistent framework, whereas there's mired with a series of internal inconsistencies. Framework way the efforts is a competitive alternative about should decide whether the plan precludes a more desirable outcome for fairness. Negative block is better. The negative has the block to criticize a different starting point in every debate. There's no line that can be drawn for the question of other starting point or any other starting point that's arbitrary and self-serving. If you allow rhetorical strategy, you also allow civilization bad, cost-benefit analysis, bad problem, solving paradigm bad, attack focus bad, domestic focus bad, and much more. We can't predict or prepare. Who's to say that any of those things are more arbitrary than absurd than their links are not that aren't rooted in logic? Excuse that based on favor and negative, and ensures lose every round. Any other model to make moves not mentally right speech and time. If the courts are good, then rename self-determination vote after education arguments. They can see fairness and control shows the direction of education because it determines the limits of the topic. At least are better in around education classroom and advocacy skills. They have to forward arguments of the state being inevitable. They forward arguments about the state being inevitable. If the state can ever be bad, then our model tells you should not challenge, which is obviously bad. Even some people engage in the state in the state in debate and bad always. In bad ways we all lead this activity. We should have critical skills and ways to formulate conceptualizations that can produce substantive engagement with movements. Psychoanalysis bad. It's a double term there. An application of an explanation of colonization is problematic because it can't interpret or because it tries to serve as interlocutor between native bodies, which always recreates Eurocentric forms of epistemology, which is just something straight conceded from the pro-evidence. Academy stuff. A links in them. That was the overview. B, the impacts of state circumvention, which we both impact turning generate solvency for the permutation debate. This is a star remarks. This is where we win. This is where we win. A is not it impacts the fantasy and the investment in fantasy because it proves our fantasy is good. Second, it solves all their links because it says that an application of the third space, which is third space, allows for concurrent sovereignties to exist that allow for native self-determination and imposition of will over the settler state by using the tools of settler states such as funding and resources and court systems to develop their own conceptions of sovereignty, which A answers the pig argument because they can't, because it's not, we aren't imposing Western forms of sovereignty upon them, but second, it says that Western forms of sovereignty are key to resulting in that engagement, because absent that, natives always get taken down the moment they get close enough to self-determination, as proven by the Lakota argument that comes conceded out of the two in our word. The moment they stole land, the government stole a wreck of money from them so they couldn't operate that land effectively. The only resolution to this country that allows for native self-determination over land with the effective resources is to use the colonizer implicated. They've not answered that theoretical framework. The saviorism stuff, the institution stuff, I've already answered the saviorism stuff. About the it's inevitable. They can see the whole commitment and say you can't get rid of a nuclear armed power, that even if you can, it will result in worse forms of settler governments because they still have privilege and power, which means the best way to understand and conceptualize resistance is engagement. They have not failed to articulate how engagement can both be good and bad within a rhetorical analysis in the alternative, which means you should default affirmative.
Do you need any cards?
I think I should be okay.
Okay, thanks.